just gave us, you know, in terms of how you get from 30.9 up to 32.74. That breakdown, without going into quite that much detail, I mean, you've shared that with us here in meetings, and you even said that that's been based on your discussions with staff, and that and staff have confirmed the 32.754. And for the record,
that's not true.
Okay,
that's not true.
Okay,
you all have seen what the budget is. When we pass the budget amendments, it shows what the budget is.
at that point, if you would please let me talk, I'm trying to explain it. I agree that these numbers, I've got questions about a couple of the numbers. I mean, I agree that this is, you know, public information, at least to a degree. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong at all with you getting information like this. You know, if you get information like this and getting it from public records or from conversation or whatever, there's nothing wrong with that. I think we all have a responsibility as public officials to be well informed. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I took issue with the fact that a majority of the commission did say that we wanted to discuss the budget today. I mean, that's our prerogative, and Fred told us no. I mean, we got an email back saying this will not be added to the agenda. And of course, that got my dander up, because that's our. I mean, that's in terms of we already talked about the roles and responsibilities of, you know, commission, department heads, rank and file, etc. But I mean, according to KRS and the city charter, I mean, the ability to the ultimate responsibility for setting the agenda rests with a majority of the city commission. So if a majority of the city commission say, add this to the agenda, it is inappropriate for staff to try to overrule that and say, no, we won't. I mean, that's...
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
Did you have three people to tell him to do that before he said on
this was I sent an email requesting. Well, yeah, sure. The process that you outlined in the email you read, where I requested that we add X number of things to the agenda. Of course, this is all in the interest of transparency. So, I mean, the point I was making in terms of I'm going to discuss this whether you all like it or not is I was going to bring up the budget today, not to point fingers, not to make accusations, not to attack or slander anybody, because I've got some questions about the budget. And my point was that
How did I get involved in that? Why did you write this? Because
when making that request, we got a response back saying, no, we want to add this to the agenda. And I'm sorry that I took a firm tone on this, but that's not appropriate. That's not within staff's purview to say, you know, to ignore a direction from the executive authority like that.
You were not. If you have three, you can do that.
That's what I'm saying.
You did it the first time.
Yes, I did, Mayor. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
Before you had 3 votes. Before you're talking about the one.
We got responses to the. Yeah, we got responses to the. I sent. It goes exactly the way. I mean, it went down the way you read out loud. I requested X number of things in an email, which is, you know, standard practice, that we've added to the agenda. Michael Turner replied in full, you know, something that sounds good to me. Replied to Fred and to everybody, including you. I assume you get all of these emails.
I don't reply to them, but I saw.
Sure, but I assume you get them. I just had Ramona Princeton for you. Commissioner Hedden responded that, well, I essentially said I'd like to, I think we should set half of it aside for later, but I agree we need to discuss all of it, so let's discuss half of it on the 20th. Which I, you know, happily agreed with, and I'm especially happy about that now, or we'd be here for another 4 hours. I mean, that's where our meeting on the 20th. But the point of the matter is, yes, 3 commissioners on the record is agreeing that the budget should be on the agenda today. And once we've got those 3 votes on there,
that's right.
Exactly. Well, but that's not the way it works. We got an email back from Ramona saying that, and I don't fault Ramona for this. I assume that she was just doing what Fred told her, or the manager told her. Or maybe we got the email from Fred, actually. oh, I can't remember who sent the email. The point of that is we got an email back from staff saying, no, this isn't going on the agenda. That we're not ready to discuss this. And so I got my dander up, first of all, because if this isn't a power trip thing, I don't like getting into these fights. I don't enjoy being on the commission. I believe I struggle with running again, and I've thought, hardly a month goes by that I don't think about just walking away. I mean, I don't enjoy this. This isn't fun at all. This keeps my soul alive. I mean, it's not a power trip, but if elected representatives by state law can't direct staff to perform even the most basic function, like adding something to the agenda, which is absolutely our prerogative, then there's no point in running for office. There's no point in voting. There's no point in even pretending that we live in a democracy. This system of government doesn't work unless it works according to law, unless it works the way it's supposed to. So when the majority of the commission said add this to the agenda, that should have been the end of the discussion. And when it wasn't, then yeah, I got upset, and I wasn't. I took a firm tone, and I wasn't trying to be insulting when saying this is not a request. I was just pointing out that when three of us say do it, it's not a request. We're not asking the city manager to put this on the agenda. We're not asking the permission to put it on the agenda. When three of us agree to add an item to the agenda, it's not a request. That's a direction, and directions need to be followed, or our whole form of government just doesn't even work. I mean, that's the essence of that. Okay. And in terms of in the fact that you've discussed some of this, just in terms of getting information, which I don't fault you for, the fact that some of this has been discussed with staff, I don't have a problem with that at all. It wasn't a problem until staff said, well, we're not going to discuss it with you all per your direction. The whole thing, my data getting out, all of that was only about adding this item to the agenda for discussion. And when I pointed out that we were going to discuss this, whether you don't like it or not, I wasn't talking about anybody getting secret information, because the information isn't secret. I mean, I would expect that, I think all of us have gone to Steve and asked questions about one thing or another, and that's perfectly appropriate. There's nothing wrong with that. It wouldn't be inappropriate unless, and I don't think Steve's ever done this. So I'm not picking on you, because I don't think you would do this. But if I go to you and ask you a question, and you give me the answer, and then Commissioner Turner goes and asks you the question, and you won't talk with him about it, obviously, that would be inappropriate. And the inappropriateness isn't us talking. I mean, it was the refusal to put it on the agenda and to talk about it today, which was it's just an agenda transparency issue. So that's it. That's all. Okay. Are we okay in that regard? Okay. Mr. May.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to point out too, under the city commission, our board of commissioners, our rules of procedure, it says the city manager shall set the agenda. But then there's some checks and balances on those rules as well, that would allow for a majority of the commission at a commission meeting to say that if the majority wants to add something to the agenda, they can do so at the meeting. And I think that was put into place, I'm trying to think what, it might have been 98 or 99, I think. Who would know? I mean, and that's for that checks and balances to be there. So previously, when the city was the city rules on that forever and ever were that the mayor is presiding officer of the board of commissioners would set the agenda. And then around 98, 99 in that range, the commission changed that. I voted against that because of the very reason I was afraid it takes away checks and balances. So there, I guess, already exists an opportunity at a meeting if there's something that the commission, if a majority of the commission wants to put something on the agenda, can be added that night. And I understand that some may not necessarily agree that that's always the best time to do that. I for one, I'm not sure that's the best, but there is in the rules of procedure a method for that to keep checks and balances, where if under the current way, if the city manager, since the city manager is the person in charge of putting the agenda together, were to say, I'm not going to add this to the agenda, then on the night of the meeting, as after the meeting's called to order, then a member of the commission can make a motion, someone can second it, they can discuss it and say, we're going to add these to the agenda, which that would allow for that to take place.
Is that can I ask a question, Commissioner? Is that a formal vote that has to go down?
They could do it by voice vote, just a majority. It just would allow a majority to put something on the agenda. So you can have, it's not, under our form, we're the executive authority and legislative authority, but it's supposed to be designed so that the executive authority and the legislative authority can have some separation, although we are the same here, so that one can't outrule the other. So it's that checks and balance thing. So in this case, if the city manager is the authority putting the agenda together, the rest of the 5 board members, in that case, would say at a meeting, we want this to be added to the agenda either that night or for a future agenda.
There are also provisions in KRS for a majority of the commission to add items to the agenda or take items off. Not that I mentioned any of us would exercise that power outside of meetings, right?
And I will say too, when I was mayor, if there were, at a meeting, if folks wanted to talk about an issue, there really wasn't anything that anybody could say, well, we can't let you, I mean, we can't stop you from talking about it. Certainly, if there were a majority, they didn't have to vote on it. But those rules of procedure have existed that allow that.
Well, and that's my point. Is it nothing in an open meeting? Any of us can talk about anything she wants to. The only reason to add stuff to the agenda is, I mean, just purely in the interest of transparency, so that folks know what we're going to be discussing ahead of time. If we know we intend to discuss something, then it's only appropriate for us to add it to the agenda. But
I guess Mr. Nelson comes in.
Well, I would just like to make a short statement. Once again, I think one of my most important obligations is to keep the commission informed. And the commission doesn't know all circumstances. Sometimes they might make decisions they wish they hadn't made, or might have avoided something. And I was simply, as we were conversing about what would be on the agenda, I was simply trying to balance the time. That I had a draft agenda, and then one of the commissioners proposed that we add about 8 things to that agenda, and I simply thought we'd be here all night, and we might be here all night anyway. But I was simply trying to balance that agenda, and then there was, and I just thought we were negotiating. I thought, well, we're just talking here, you know. And so then the proposal to put that budget item on, I wanted the commission to know that we had not yet received much material to go by. We had not received the department worksheets. And I think last year you all didn't really take this up until you got the departmental worksheets. And I think it was February 28th. I looked it up. And so I simply wanted you all to know this might be premature, you know, it might not have as much to talk about as you'd like. And that's all I didn't bluntly say, no, I refuse to do this. I think and I haven't looked at the verbiage, but I think I said something to that fact. And so, you know, I didn't know it was going to be such a hard issue. I was simply negotiating for what the agenda might be.
well, we got just to clarify the communication. I mean, we did get an email. We got 2 emails. I remember it was clear. We got one from one from you saying that, you think we should discuss this with, as you described, but then we did get, an email of the draft agenda from Ramona, and that was the response that I did, and that was the reply that the mayor read.
And
Saying that this is not being added to the agenda.
absolutely, and it was a draft for your comment. It was not the final intent, it was a draft.
It's really something I want to find out.
Commissioner Head here, then you, Commissioner Turner.
I just wanted to get back on task,
Amen.
and
It's 9 o'clock.
emails are open to public record. We take the ones that are open, they can use them.
Commissioner Turner?
That's
It's okay, okay.
And then with this, one thing you left out there was the seceded loans.
Pardon?
The seceded loans was another thing that we added to pay as well, as part of the budget.
Oh, that wasn't the budget amendment.
It wasn't?
No.
The
We had,
radio is
we
part
would
of
have
that.
5, like,
I thought it was.
we had, no, not budget amendments. See, our budget that we passed in June, and then now we've made, it would be 5 budget amendments. And the 5 amendments will be the increase, 2% increase in salary, paying for the garbage cans in the survey, the snow plow
The snow plow.
thing, the
Garbage truck.
purchasing a garbage truck and paying for a code enforcement officer, and then $20,000 for garbage bags, and the 5th one's gonna be for paying for this roof, $130,000.
Right, okay. I just had seceded written down as well, not a budget amendment.
Yeah.
The radios were, but they might have been the previous
They were
fiscal year.
previous year. And I'm sorry to jump the gun on your department. I thought that some stuff would be prepared after talking to Frank this afternoon. I guess you guys aren't ready.
We're in the just in the early stages of starting to put the budget together, is what we're doing right now.
And I just wanted to think about things we changed last year, which would be the healthcare and the garbage tax. Were 2 things that we changed, hoping that we can kind of decrease some of our healthcare cost. Hopefully the garbage tax can even itself out. We'll see what happens after the first year with the new phase review program.
You mentioned the garbage fee, we had a budget of $550 for the garbage fee. It's in a budget now.
Right.
But we billed out, what, $350 so far this year is what we billed out. And it looks like, I think, well, he's not here right now, but it's around $300,000, $350 is what they anticipate, next year. So we're gonna lose some revenue there.
Okay, but we might gain in the recycling revenue. We might.
It's kind of, that's the unknown part right now. The revenue side is really, the longer, and I mentioned this before to the commission, but the longer we can hold back as far as putting our budget together and see what the revenue stream looks like,
Right.
the more accuracy we're going to get with the budget, because the revenue streams are really the unknown. It's
Right,
really the
insurance
unknown
premiums.
part of it, yeah. And insurance premium, I heard today that we talked about maybe, Mike might be familiar with this, they're talking about our ratings improvement here, and it was going to drive the insurance costs down, which will drive down our insurance.
For property and casualty?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm hearing, so that could have a negative impact on our
Right.
insurance premium.
But that wouldn't be the case with health. I mean, that's always.
Yeah, but health's a real small portion of that. There's a really, the property is what's driving, the property and I think it's the liability drives that premium, not the health insurance,
Gotta
yeah.
get the government hired.
So, yeah, that could have a negative impact on our insurance premium.
And just some things that I had noted to look at, I guess, if not by July, but maybe after July, the following years. Of course, we have to look at the pension, the COLA, the fleet for our departments. How much money are we spending on them getting service in our garage versus what the cost may be for budgeting for a certain number of fleet every year.
Yeah.
And of course, our building updates, that the mold and the
Yeah.
buildings and everything.
A lot of what he was, the mayor was talking about, we You know, I don't know if you remember last month, but when we talked a little bit about, when he called me to the podium, I was talking about our capital expenditure budget. What it was, versus what it is right now. We were spending, when I came here, about $2.1 million what we were spending. We've watered it down to about 600,000. So we've taken about 1.5 per year out of our capital expenditure budget. So we don't have a lot of capital expenditure budget that's included in that 31 million that we passed, you know, back in June. There's hardly anything in there for capital expenditures. And that's why we've got a lot of these budget amendments on there. That's why we've got these budget amendments, because we don't have a capital expenditure budget. So the $44K that we're spending on the snow plow and the garbage truck, you know, that's a budget amendment.
Right.
Because we do not have a capital budget, and we've been buying a lot of stuff. Either we haven't been buying it or we've been buying it out of other accounts. But basically, the city, just the staff back here, and I, you know, thankful for those guys. They've been holding back, and that's why we have grown the reserve a little bit the last few years. But we need it for these kind of expenditures that are coming due right now.
So does it make sense to try to add that expense again to our budget, or to just keep it?
Well, I mean, it depends on, you know, what our priority, you know, I think we need to prioritize these types of things and decide, you know, how, you know, we're going to try to, I suppose, you know, what I try to do is keep it in the middle of the road and try to get a balanced budget. If we get a balanced budget, so you know, that's the kind of discussions we'll be having when we start to talk about this. But I don't know if you recall, hope it's okay if I keep talking for a few minutes. Last year, when we started this budget process, and I'm planning on doing the same thing this year, is I'll start out showing you what the receipts are, and the estimated receipts are, and the expenditures are. The first version is when the data comes out at the end of February. So we'll be able to see what the gap is at that point. And like the mayor said, it looks like, you know, we could be looking at a $1.5 million gap, and that's what we remember last year. We started out with 1.4 million. So as we start to whittle things down, I mean, I want you all to see what, you know, what the staff is working on to try to get this thing back, you know, in balance. But, you know, we're going to have to make some tough decisions. There's no doubt about it. But we're not unlike any other, you know, other cities around us. I mean, everybody's making tough decisions. But I mean, he's got some legitimate concerns. You know, he's concerned, and it's funny. The League of Cities just projected. There was an email that went around a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that showed that they projected our pension costs increased about $200,000 for the city of Frankfort, and it's actually 186,000 or something. And I went into the system and my estimating system and went in there and keyed the numbers in, and I came up with 187,000, almost to the penny, the number that they had come up with. So I don't know how they got the number, but it was right on. I mean, it was right on. We're going to have about a $200,000 increase in pension costs next year.
I guess another thing that we as a commission should think about too is, and one of them will probably come up the next meeting, is revenue streams, one of which is rental inspections, mandating rental inspections. You know, that may not be $1.10 million that we can get, but we might be able to get 100,000 or so, if not more, depending on how we set that up, if it passes. Maybe taking parking meters as a revenue stream. And trying to think also maybe small business feeds America, and if we could find out, maybe work with the chamber and Cecilia, like we talked about, and just following up with those groups, trying to figure out how to be increasing economic business within the city limits. You know, the cities, the one thing about the county is it has the entire county limits. The city is stuck within the city limits. We're basically kind of sandwiched in, but we need to think about what can we do as a city to make it more attractive for businesses to start up. And working with those entities, and maybe the idea of redeveloping Home Street and going into a very unpopular discussion of possible annexation routes. But I'm just trying to think financially, like what can we do as well for generate revenue streams besides just increasing taxes?
Yeah, I think growing businesses, you know, that's the private sector, and I'll make this comment, that what I've seen so far this year, we've seen our revenue stream for the state go down about $250,000 since the beginning of the year, but we've also seen an offset of the private sector occupation tax go up about 250, 275, a little bit more higher than the state's gone down. So if the state, if the state can come back, it's just been almost a continual decline. I think the high point threshold for the state was $8 million, and we're down to like 7.1, 7.2 right now. So that's, been continually dropping off. And I was hoping this year was going to pick up because, the furloughs, the state's not furloughing right now. And I was hoping we'll see the trend come back, but I'm not sure with the governor's comments, he said he was going to cut 8% out of the budget. I'm not sure what impact it's going to have. I'm sure they're going to have to, it's going to have an impact on contract labor, which could affect our, private sector money, or, internally, reduce headcount there.
Right.
I know this past year, we've seen about a 500 headcount reduction in labor force in the state, which is part of that 250 that we saw go down. So it's a struggle. It's a struggle to keep things in balance, and that's. I know everybody gets frustrated because it's you're talking negative, but what I try to do is I try to keep things. The problem we have while we're talking here, honestly, tonight, is we got a structural issue. Our wages and our benefits are 70, and I mentioned this before, but I'll say it again, it's 73% of our budget. And when you tack on the bond payment, and when you tack on insurance for property and liability costs, you're looking at 83% of your cost is those 3 items. And when that starts getting out of sync with the money coming in, you can't hardly get it back in the middle of the road without making some tough decisions. And I keep talking about the past $2 million that we're drawing down every year for 4 or 5 years. Once you get into that pattern, then that really puts the pressure on you guys to make some tough decisions. I don't want to go back to those times, man. It was not fun. It was not fun. So I want to keep this thing in the middle of the road until the economic climate can improve, and then we can start seeing some growth. But in the meantime, like I said, we need to work on trying to bring business in and try to develop a friendly, business climate. That's kind of where we are.
We can figure out the margins for some things. I know, I think Steve said that he had actually already intended to bring up the potential of streamlining licensing.
Yeah, and I can do that.
And that's potential to raise, every bit counts, but that's potential to make things easier on.
It's going to be administratively easier and lower our costs, and we can bring it 7,000 to 10,000 a year. It's not big money, but we can do some. We'll have to check the numbers on that.
But that, hopefully, that's also something that could spur business a little bit. We'll talk rental stuff's on the docket next week. One thing, and I don't say this to. I don't want to take offense to this. I'm not saying this to challenge people, but just to challenge ideas. I don't want to run a commission for 3 years. A couple of years ago, we were told that we had to charge the $600,000 garbage fee in order to break even. And then subsequent audits revealed that we pulled in, I guess, was it 1 point? I can't remember if the surplus was 1 or 1.3 that year.
About 1.3.
But it showed that in hindsight, and I realize I'm not saying people didn't believe what they were saying at the time, but in hindsight, we didn't have to charge that $600,000 in order to break even. We would have broke even anyway. And I realize there are lots of other factors in there, including the department seriously tightening their belts and higher than anticipated revenues, et cetera. But it felt like we ran into the same situation the next year where we were told we had to do
X, Y, and Z just in order to break even. And then it turns out the revenues were again higher than expected. And, I mean, I'm not, it's hard for me not to make the assumption that if we shoot for break even again, that we're pulling another, we've actually, if revenues are, our revenue projections over the past 3 years haven't changed that much, have they?
Revenue projections, not so much.
And the revenues haven't changed that much.
You gotta realize, we're transferring $600,000 out of other accounts every year.
Sure.
And so, you look at $1 million this year, for example, in the general fund, that's what we brought in, okay?